everybody, and welcome to Out to All the Things. I am the Phantom Flutist. Today we're going to talk about a bad day practice list. Now, first of all, what is a bad day practice list? I tell all of my students that you need to make a bad day practice list. It does several things. First and foremost, it gives you joy. The second point, it's to help you practice when you really don't want to. Are there days where you're so frustrated and you just need a vacation from your instrument? Yes. Should you take a vacation from your instrument? There's times where you need to, and that's okay. But I always tell all of my students, it's okay to play your instrument. Not every time you pick it up has to be a practice session. It's okay to play for joy. That's why you learned your instrument. There's many different reasons why we pick and we learn and we want to become musicians. But first and foremost, in order to be a good musician, you have to enjoy it. Now, some people may argue, no, you don't. You just have to be a master at your techniques, your tones, and everything else. But from what I've seen, if you don't enjoy your instrument, eventually you're going to be burnt out and you're going to quit. And is it okay to quit? Sometimes it is. Sometimes you need to pause and life comes at you and you need to change directions, and that's okay. But too many times people quit, and it's not because of their instrument, it's because of everything else. They got burnt out, they're tired of playing just techniques and studies. So I always encourage all of my students to have a bad day practice list. Now, how do you do it? Besides just having your favorite songs in this thing. Well, the way I look at it is try to find songs that have techniques that you need to practice. For example, let's say you need to practice jumps and leaps and maybe even arpeggiation. Well, a good example of this would be Paint It Black, the Wednesday Addams solo, where she plays the cello piece, and I haven't watched the series, but I have seen this clip, and somebody just decided to give me a flute version of it, and well, of course, I play it on the alto too. And I noticed that it had a lot of these jumps and leaps, and I prefer playing that over my exercise that I was struggling with at the time. So here would be this example. get the point. Instead of beating myself over a study, I found myself I was more willing to practice this little song that had the exact same techniques I was struggling with. So what I did for a while was I paused on my quote unquote technique study for it, and I just enjoyed playing this song over and over and over again. And then I went back to my exercise, and you know what? I was able to do it. Now, of course, it's been over a year ago, so I would have to go back in, of course, practice it more in order to get better at it again. And you know what? That's okay. Another example would be is I do not like to play my scales or chromatic scales at all. And if anyone questioned to how much I hated it, during my master class in college, my professor asked, "Class, why do we practice our scales?" I raised my hand and they asked, and he goes, "Why do we practice our scale?" I smiled and said, "To make you happy, Mr. Lippy." The entire class busted out laughing. He put his hand to his face and he goes, "No, absolutely not. You do not practice it to make me happy." And I go, "If you're happy, you're more likely to give me a better grade." Of course, they laughed even harder. I hated practicing my scales and my chromatic scales. However, a friend of mine was joking to me and said, "Why don't you practice the flight of the bumblebee? It's the same thing. It just sounds more pretty." Well, I did that. And lo and behold, I actually got a better grade practicing my chromatic scales, because I was graded on, I had to play, I forgot what scale, and then I had to play the chromatic scale afterwards. And he goes, "Wow, you finally practice your scales." And I go, "No, I just practiced the flight of the bumblebee." Of course, everybody laughed, but it did the same thing, because it contained elements of what I was struggling with, but it was done in a way where it wasn't so painful to play it. So, another reason why I always recommend my students and anyone who's a teacher to help build this bad day practice session is sometimes a student may come in, you know, and honestly, they should just not even take their instrument out. They may just need a talking session. Life is only getting harder. And sometimes a bad day practice list, helping, going with a student through their bad day practice session, is sometimes a lot more efficient than drilling all of the techniques that they have to do. I'm not saying that etudes and studies and these techniques are bad. No, we should practice them. But I also believe in balance. And it also helps recognizes patterns. Like, okay, the flight of the bumblebee is a lot of different chromatic scales. And sometimes it answers the question that students have. Why do we have to practice this? Well, I show them, okay, in this song, here's a lot of arpeggiations. In this song, here's a lot of leaps and jumps. In this song, okay, here's this scale, here's that scale. And as they start recognizing it, it starts developing, oh, okay. It's kind of like when you're learning how to read. The first thing they teach you besides sight words, and they teach you sounds, and then they start teaching you sight words, and then you start forming sentences, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, it's the same thing in music. You know, you're like, okay, I see it here. I also see it in this song and in this song. And it can make just practicing that much funner, that much easier, where it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Now, another thing I do when it's a bad day, this is when I encourage my students to explore and try alternative techniques. And I even do it for my absolute beginners, because I believe that when you're willing to explore and try different techniques, when it's time to learn harder and more advanced techniques, it's not so scary. Like, for example, sing and play. I would go, okay, you're having what feels like a bad tone day. And sometimes a student will come in and go, I'm having a bad tone day, just everything feels off. And I'm like, okay, let's pick your favorite song. And they'll be like, okay. They'll go like, let's do Paint It Black. I'm like, okay. Now, let's break it up. I would say the first line, instead of playing eighth notes, let's do quarter notes. And let's sing and play. And they're like, okay, how do I do it? Let's go do. It doesn't matter. You know, I guess what pitch for this tense and purposes. I mean, you can pick, the same pitch that you're playing, or you can go above or below, but I just say do, and then do, and then you start blowing into your instrument while doing do at the same time. Do. Again. And then, of course, I tell them, go faster. And then I tell them, okay, it's written, but sing and play it at the same time. Now, try to make it as short as possible. And then, after they're comfortable with it, I tell them, all right, play it normal as written. And normally by then, the singing playing has made them all loose up and they're all mature, that whatever they were struggling with tends to work itself out. But instead of trying to be frustrated by nitpicking it, just by doing singing and playing, it normally works itself out without the frustration. And that's what I try to encourage, the bad day practice list. Play your favorite songs. Find songs that incorporate things that you normally wouldn't practice, but you enjoy it. And then have fun with it. Beatbox Mozart if you want to. Have fun. It's okay. If anything, I want you guys to take out of this, it's okay to play your instrument for fun. Not every time you take your instrument out has to be an intense practice session. Make time to have fun with your instrument. Everyone's different. Everyone's bad day practice list is going to look different. And as a teacher, I would encourage you to also make a individual bad day practice list for your students. Have them work on it. Have them find songs that they enjoy. Sometimes even let them have a different folder. And when they take the bad day practice list out, tell them to take a deep breath and enjoy a wonderful, happy bad day practice list session together. Music is wonderful. Music is fun. Let's not beat the joy out of it. It's okay to play and not practice every day. I am the Phantom Flutist. I hoped you learned something. Have a wonderful day. And never forget why you wanted to learn your instrument. I hope you learned something. Good day or good night.